Okay, so remember when I first brought up the idea of arrays, I had this problem that you would ask the user for a sentence, and you'd ask them for a bunch of sentences until they entered a blank string, and then your task in the program was to print out the sentences in reverse order. And I said that you can't do that without some type of dynamic structure like the arrays. You can't anticipate how many variables to store all of these things into. And arrays are perfect for this kind of a concept because I can keep adding elements to the array until I run out of memory. I mean, I can build up gigabytes of data in an array, and it just doesn't matter. So I wanted to go through and see if we could figure out how to write that program. So since we're going to ask until something happens, what is the what did I say the until something happens is? The user entered a what? A carriage return, a blank line, right? Nothing. So we need to have some kind of a while loop. I'm going to do it with a while loop. You can do it with all kinds of loops, but so we'll break that down. While something happens, while the user entered user line, how would I continue this loop until this was this Boolean expression was false? While user line is what? Not equal to? Not equal to an empty string. Continue to do stuff. All right? So a while loop requires an initial condition. So we might set this to something that is not an empty line, just so that it goes into the loop the first time. Does everybody see that? That's a common programming construct that we have to fake the computer and get into this while loop initially. I could always prompt and ask for more for the first line of code and then go into this, but in the loop, what am I going to have to do anyway? How do I change this expression? No? I have to get a new line from the user. That changes my Boolean expression. So I don't want to write that prompt and it gets twice, so I kind of fool it for the first time to get into this while loop. And then inside of here, we're going to print out, please enter a line, blank line to quit. All right? And I'm going to then get that data from the user. What method do I use on that? Gets. And I store it into what variable? User line equals gets. And I always want to, almost always, get rid of the carriage return, right? So I'm going to chomp it. And I'll show you why we do that in a minute. If we don't do that, we'll actually end up with an infinite loop. All right? So once I get that data, what do I want to do with that data? Well, I want to store it into an array, okay? So I need an array to start with. I need an array out here. We'll call it lines. And we're going to initialize it to a blank array, which is just two square brackets facing each other. That's a blank array, has nothing in it. And then I want to add this new line to the array. All right? So how do I get a data into an array? Well, at one point I told you that we could say line sub 0 equals user line. All right? But then how do I know what this number is? Well, I'd have to have a counter. I'd have to increase the number so that every time in the loop that number goes up and I'm adding it to the next row in my array, right? But and since this is done constantly, there's a nicer feature that lets me push the information at the end of the array. So I can use these two chevrons left next to each other. And that says, take this data and stuff it into the end of my lines array. So my lines array is going to continue to grow, leaving everything else there at the beginning. So the first time through, if I have an empty array, the line sub 0, the first element in the array, is going to have the first line they type. and so on. So it's just going to keep appending to the end of the current array. Isn't that nice? Say yes, Dave. That's nice. All right, so then at the end, how would I print out the lines? All right, so I want to print them in reverse order, though. How do I print my array in reverse order? There you go, lines.reverse. All right, so that should work. Let's see if it does. It's all off the top of my head, so we'll see. Enter a line. Line 1, line 2, line 3, and I hit enter as a blank line, and it says line 321. Sweet! Isn't that nice? Now I could run that all day entering line numbers, and the program would run continuously, keep stuffing new stuff into the end of my array. My array gets really huge, and I run out of memory and crash the computer. That's possible. But the idea is that I don't have to know ahead of time how many variables I'm going to need to store this information. And this is a very common practice in programming as well. You have no idea what the users are going to enter. Now I wanted to take this out. Before we go on, any questions on that? What? Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir. Any other questions on what we did here? Now I want to take this data out, this .chomp, and I want to run it again and see what happens. Line 1, line 2, line 3, hit return, hit return, hit return. What happened? Okay, so this statement never becomes false, because what does user line actually have in it? No, not a space. A carriage return, all right? It has that invisible carriage return in there, that will never equal an empty string. It's got a /n inside the double quotes. You have to think of it that way. Is never going to equal just 2 quotes by itself. So that chomp was very important in this case. This is a common error that people do as well. So so I have to break it. I have to quit like that to get out of that. That's an infinite loop. Let's run it in the debugger and see, just to show you that. So here's the debugger. Here's where we're at. And since it's waiting for user input, the debugger is here. I have to go to the console to type in the line. Okay, so let's make it down here. Let's make my stop point there instead. So now it's sitting there waiting in the console for me to type something. So I go to the console. It should have said, it did, please enter a line, and so I type line 1. And I hit return, and we come back to the debugger, and we're at this line. So now I can go to the debugger. I can look at this variable. It has the word line 1 in it with a notice how it's a little bit longer though. Line 1 has a character in here that you can't see. The 1 something quote. That kind of gives you a hint that there's some data in there. So let's run it again. Go back to the console, type in a carriage return, and we come back to here, and we can see what user line has in it is a quote with a something and a quote. So we don't know exactly what that is yet. So we could actually look at that character and try to figure out what that character is. In Ruby 1.9 and above, they changed it so that strings can be referenced like an array. They're pretty cool. That's the way C does it. So I can actually say user line, how do I get the first character of a line? I can say sub-0. All right, the first character of the line gives me this quote here. All right. If I look at let's user line sub 1, I'm going to get a nil. There's nothing beyond that, okay? So that kind of gives us a clue that I hit enter, that enter is going to be in that character line here. I think I can do this too. User line sub 0 dot 2i. Nope. That didn't work. So forget that. So that shows me that the gets is getting that carriage return. I have to chomp that off if I want my Boolean expression to ever quit. Right? Any questions on that?
Would you just put a space between the quotes on the while line?
No. Okay, let's do that. I don't do a chomp. I do a space instead. And let's run it again. Oh, because I have a space here, let's put 2 spaces here just to force it in. I'd probably put a blank. So I'm going to say line 1 and hit return, 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 return. Still an infinite loop because what is in my user line here? It's a carriage return, not a space. So a carriage return will never equal a space. So even though in the debugger it looked like a space, it's actually this empty, this /n is what it is.
What if you hit space?
Then, okay, if I hit a space in return, same thing. Now my user line has a space and a return in it, 2 characters. A space and a return will never equal a single space. You can't get there from here. You've got to get rid of that carriage return. All right, so one other way is maybe I make this into an actual carriage return. Remember that the slash escaped this special character, and now this is a string containing just a carriage return. Let's see if that will work. My lucky day it won't, but let's see. There we go. So now user line had in it only the carriage return. I compared it with a carriage return. That's the only thing in the line, and so it does the same thing. It stops me. All right, so there are 3 different ways to do that. Any questions on that? All right.
Mine wouldn't work until I put that carriage return in there.
Then you didn't put the chomp.
Chomp? Okay.
Yeah,
I have to get chomp like user line?
I did that. This is the way I would normally have written it. I would have added the .chomp here.
Okay.
Make it bigger for those old people in the back.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. All right. No questions? You guys are perfectly content with arrays? The assignment after the histogram deals with arrays quite a bit, and where you take input from a user and you store it in an array, you compare different arrays together and things like that. So you're going to be doing a lot of this kind of stuff. Yeah, let's go look. Let's go look it up. There's I think there's a method called push. So we'll go to the array class. See, they've changed where some of these things are. A pop and a push. Okay, so here's a push. Says to add this data to the end of a string. It says put it on the end of the array. So that's identical to the 2 chevrons. And then the pop takes it off of the last element of the array and takes it off of that and returns it. So a.pop of this array gives you a little d. I mean a D character. And there should be a method to get the first one off the array too. That's in Rails. They added that in the Rails code itself. So there is a first and a second and a last method, but those aren't in the base Ruby code. I think it's shift. Yeah. Shift. This is a common way. This is also in JavaScript. This will take the first element of the array and removes it, shifting everything back one. So there's lots of cool things. There's a shuffle, which is new in Ruby 1.9 and up, that randomizes your array for you. That might be useful had you created an array in your rock, paper, scissors. I don't know. Depends on how you wrote it. Sort. We talked about sort. There's lots of them. But those are the main ones. I use this one just because it's shorter, makes sense to me. But this would be the same as, let's do it another way. This would be the same thing as lines.push of user line. Those two lines here would be identical. Okay, good question. Any other questions on that? All right, let's take my same code here and do something a little different. Let's say I want to add up all the numbers that a user enters into their computer. Enter a number. And let's go back to the .chomp and make this an empty string and this a single space. And we can still, we'll call the new push thing. And so let's run this. This should be the same thing. Yeah. So I'm going to enter a 3, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5. Hit return. It quits. Prints them out in reverse order, and these are numbers. Now, how about if I want to add all these numbers up together? So I might have some. How would I set this up so I can add the numbers and keep them in the array at the same time? So I'm going to add up all the numbers in the array. No?
Just do the array plus, or sorry, the array equals the array plus the gets.
No. Let me say it a different way. I want my lines to stay intact like I have before, but I want to take that and print out a total of all of the elements in the array. Now there is, I believe, nope, there's not. So never mind. So I need to, as they're coming off the line, as I'm walking through and getting the new line from the user, I'm taking it, I'm looking at it, I'm stuffing it in my array, and I want to add that then to a total that I want to keep. I need a new variable, okay? So I might say my total equals 0 to start with. And then in my code, I want to convert this and say whatever that value is, I want to add it to whatever I have in my total. All right? And then I want to put out my total at the bottom. Let's do it at the end of this. Puts. No. Yes, I do. But let's do this. So the first time through, I'm doing it wrong here because this is similar to the debugging quiz that you're going to have next week, just to give you a hint. I put in a 3, and I say I can't add, string can't be coerced into fixed num. So this is what type of variable is userLine at this point in the code? It's a string, okay? Because gets always gives me a string. All right? So I don't have to, where would I convert that data if I'm looking for numbers? Very good. At the time that I'm going to get the data from the user. So I want to convert this to an integer right then and there. And remember we talked about the 2i automatically does a chomp by default. It just ignores the carriage return because it got to the end of numbers and couldn't convert anymore. So we don't have to do a chomp as well. So now that should work. I got a problem still. Why? Nope.
You're supposed to have an empty string.
To where?
You're supposed to have an empty string to end it.
Right. And
Total is not
right, I'm converting userLine into an integer. So if I hit a return, what is userLine going to have in it? A 0. By default, if it can't determine anything out of a string of characters, it'll return a 0. So does 0 ever equal an empty string? All right, so how would I change my Boolean expression here? All right, good. There we go. So it says 1, 2, 3. It did it in reverse. 1, 2, 3, 0. And then it added those up. 3 plus 2 is 5 plus 1 is 6. So there's my total at the bottom. Yes, because of here, I got the 0. I stored it in my userLine. I added it to my array. And then I added it to my total. Now, it doesn't affect my total, but my array has this extraneous 0 in it, right? So how might I get rid of that 0? What, when?
You have to put an F in there, I think 0.
That would be one way to do it, but what if they really wanted a 0 in there? I mean, this is a little tough. Maybe my program doesn't work that way very well. But the last thing, probably the easiest would be I'm guaranteeing that the last line they entered was a 0, so I could do lines.pop here. And that would remove the last element, because I know that's always going to be a 0. So let's just see if that works. 1, 2, 3. There we go. So that worked as well. Because if I do it inside of this loop, I might enter 1, 2, 0, 3, 4, 0, 5, return, and those zeros might be relevant in some other case. I don't know. Anyway, just a different way of thinking about this, getting data, storing it into an array, printing them out. You have to be careful about, since Ruby allows strings and numbers and anything in an array cell, they can be mixed, and so you have to be careful with the data types that you're putting into these things. All right? Any questions? All right, one more thing. How would I print out from the numbers that they entered as a user, how would I print out the biggest number, the largest number they entered? Max. I could say puts max number is what? Lines.max. Very good. Lines.max. I'll run it again. 1, 2, 3, 44. And it says my max number is 44. Isn't that cool? Isn't that fun what you can do with this stuff? I'm not feeling the love again. I don't know. What?
And it's all really simple lines of code.
Really simple lines of code, right? You can do anything with computer coding. That's why I love coding. It's very creative. I get instant feedback on stuff. I'm creating something in the computer. I'm telling the computer what to do. So it just appeals to me. All right, that's enough for today. Tomorrow we will start hashes.